sometimes all this talk about, we use the word social justice or justice, and we have sort of a skittish reaction to that because that's an idea that's often been taken over by political or ideological perspectives, and it gets pushed in ways that we don't really like or we aren't comfortable with. And that's actually a very important concern. We have to be careful to understand what we're talking about when we talk about justice and caring for the poor and so on. But at the same time, we can't ignore how much the Bible talks about God caring for the poor and ministering to them and calling us to do the same. It's not optional for us. The other reaction we might have is sort of the other end of the spectrum. It might be a prideful kind of thing. If we just get the right leaders in place, then we will fix everything. If we just fix the educational system, that will be the answer to all of our deepest problems. If we put in place the right social programs, the right welfare system, and all these other things, then we will fix everything. It's sort of the approach that says we can bring about Jubilee through human effort, political effort, social reform, whatever else. Both of those approaches don't work. And let me show you from our text why. Take a look for a moment, if you will, at verse 9. In verse 9, you read something, Then have the trumpet sounded everywhere. On the 10th day of the 7th month, on the Day of Atonement, sound the trumpet throughout your land. What does that mean? Well, the Day of Atonement was the day that God dealt with the deepest problems of sin. The Day of Atonement was the day that God reminded His people that sin was so pervasive in their midst, it had wormed its way into every aspect, not just individually, but corporately as well, as a nation. And God had to deal with that. God had to deal with sin, not just at the surface, but right down to the very heart. And that required bloodshed, and that required sacrifice. And that's what happened on the Day of Atonement. And it was only after the Day of Atonement that the year of Jubilee began. Now, do you see the message there? God is saying to His people, if you want to fix what's wrong with society, if you want to fix the deep evils and problems of sin, you can't do it on your own. You can't fix it on your own. God didn't just say, hey, go into the promised land and set up a great social structure and political structure and everything will be okay. No, God said, you first need to deal with sin. And until you get to the heart of the problem, until you get down to the very core, then nothing you try will ever fix it. But God says, I have taken care of it. I have provided the way to deal with sin at its very deepest level. I have addressed sin down to the core. I have removed the curse of sin, not just personally, not just individually, but corporately. And once that happened, the trumpet sounded, the good news was proclaimed, and the people then were